The fewer doctrines I took for granted, the more personal my religious journey became. Eventually, I discovered that I couldn't hold on to most of what Christianity had become since the time of Christ. I was becoming desperate. I tried to get back to the basics of Christianity. I tried to get back to just Jesus. I just wanted to know about Jesus, just what he said and what he did. But I found that my way was obscured. Obscured by Christians, sure, but more importantly, obscured by the very document that most literalists claim is their one true document. Have they even read it? I kept wondering. How could they miss the stuff that I missed? I mean, okay, even Noah's Ark, not a good example because I never took the details of Noah's Ark literally, but you're supposed to be able to take the message, right? You're supposed to be able to take the moral of the story. Well, think about it. What is the moral of that story? It's so full of death and decay and destruction, and you just don't think about that when you're a kid. That's not what's emphasized. But when you start having any empathy, those stories are terrible. But that's not even the important part, because that was the Old Testament, and you meet a lot of Christians who are like, oh, that's so Old Testament, I'm a New Testament Christian. Well, much more shattering to me than anything in the Old Testament was in the New Testament. I mean, how many demoniacs were there in Gadarene? And that's just a small detail. Who saw Jesus when, after he died, and where? Figure that out. And what exactly were Jesus' last words? Yeah, puzzle that one out. I still think most people who think the Bible is God's Word haven't really read it, or they haven't read it with their brains engaged. And why should they? They've got pastors who read little snippets of it to them, weekly, maybe twice a week. They focus on the nice parts, and they've got houses to take care of, and children to raise, and work to do, and food to cook. I mean, why should they read that book? Really, if it were important to them, they'd be reading it. But I think it's like prayer. A lot of people deep down realize that it's just not as useful and effective as a lot of religious leaders would like them to believe. So, it's not that important, so they don't do it. It wasn't just head knowledge that changed my worldview. I could easily assimilate new information into my religion. I was used to doing that when I studied science. It was real life that encroached on my Pollyanna view of the world. Remember the South Asian tsunamis a few years ago? I agonized over the question, did God really create everything? By which at the time I meant tectonic plates, viruses, diseases. I was reminded of all that I went through those several years ago when all of this started happening with Haiti. And I thought about all the theists who are having to reconcile the carnage and suffering in Haiti right now with their version of a deity. It's a hard struggle, and it's one that a lot of people don't take the time to face or aren't brave enough to face, so they just don't think about it. So I had all this head knowledge that was conflicting with previous doctrine, and I had real life experience that was not meshing with what I wanted Christianity to be, and the final straw was when my cat died. And that may not make sense to you if you're not an animal lover, but this was the first living being for whom I was totally and completely responsible. And I held him in my arms as his body cooled. And I suddenly realized no prayer would bring him back. I realized that. I felt I knew it as surely as I knew anything. that prayer wouldn't fix that. And that was it. When I questioned the purpose and effectiveness of prayer, I had crossed a line. It was like a snap that I could hear, or it was like a crash that I felt. My entire set of beliefs was a house of cards that came crashing down right then, with his body in my arms. And there could be no going back. In the next few days, in the next months, I reeled. Where could I go? Church had been my life, but now I suddenly realized that most religious practice was a waste of time, and I no longer believed in any functional definition of God. What could I do? Now, this part will be controversial to people on both sides of the belief fence, but I continued to work for the church for 2 years after my deconversion. This video isn't about defending my choice, but I will offer that the youth group my husband and I had created would have collapsed if we had just quit. And these kids didn't have anything else to entertain them except either drugs or fundamentalist churches, both of which are detrimental for their own reasons. The kids needed community, and I helped provide that. And I'm really grateful that this youth group we started is now set up to continue without us. In a fundamentalist, literalist town in Texas, the kind of religion I was spreading, moderate, liberal, action-oriented religion, that's actually a step up. That is a big step up. And I am not ashamed of that. It was a debate. It was a constant debate about whether I should continue working for a church. But I think we did more good than harm. And take that or leave it, doesn't really matter. And really, my lesson plans and our discussions didn't change all that much. I'd already been talking to them about science, controversial science among conservative Christians, and we were already emphasized action over beliefs, so I just dropped the G word and started talking to them even more about action over beliefs. I'm glad that these kids have seen that religion doesn't have to be as restrictive as what most of their town shows them it is. Since my deconversion, I have become a stronger, happier, more purposeful person. I hope to help others make the same transition that I've made, peacefully and successfully. Life makes sense now. I'm not asking the wrong questions anymore. Questions like, why would God allow this to happen? Or, how can I tell the difference between my voice and God's? Or, why are people who claim to be in touch with God's will so at odds with each other? I'm now asking questions like, how can I help make a positive difference in the world? And how can we reach out to more people with education? And why do people believe the way that they do? I make better choices about the direction of my life. I spend more time with family and friends because my time is more precious, I realize. And I pursue my goals more purposefully because my time is more precious. I've made new sincere friends, and I've strengthened old friendships, including my friendship with my husband. We've always been able to talk deeply, and as we opened up and as we shared our questions, we discovered we were on a very similar deconversion path together. And I'm really, really grateful for that. I'm grateful for how accepting he was. My husband was very courageous throughout the whole process. If you've never believed in the afterlife, you might not understand how daunting it is to consider to go through something like the death of a loved one the very first time since you've dropped the belief in an afterlife. And I'm just grateful to be on this journey with him. I hope I've helped you understand more about where one atheist is coming from. part of my intent is to help theists and atheists come to a better understanding of each other. I hope I've helped you understand how this atheist reached the end of her faith and started a new, more authentic, and happier life. I appreciate your time. Thanks for listening. I got a huge head rush out of learning about the natural world, and I